Yes, perfect. Okay, then I will start. Welcome and thank you very much for joining this presentation about my master thesis with the topic Crop Rotation Management in Organic Protected Production Systems on the example of Italy and Spain. Today, I will first of all present to you the main findings of my thesis before having a discussion on crop rotation management in organic greenhouse production in general. I will present this presentation in English, but the link to the Spanish version is in the chat. Click it and it will automatically download. During my presentation, I will share the project background, like my research aim and the material and method of the thesis. Then I want to show you the fundamentals of crop rotation and its benefits, followed by the introduction to the regulatory framework. At the end, I want to show you my results and my main discussed findings. Before that, when you registered to today's event, there was a question about how you use crop rotation to maintain or improve soil fertility. And on this slide, I want to show you some of your answers. So one answer was very specific, saying that they rotate 3 different families in 5 years. Others also named their main crops of the plant families of Cucurbitaceae and Solanaceae, intercropped also with legumes or mustard and cereals. Already mentioned were also critical factors when coming to the implementation of crop rotation, like the time and space management to integrate crop rotation and cover crops, and also the obligation to do crop rotation because of regulations. So before further elaborating these points, I want to give you some background information on my master thesis. So it was supervised by my main supervisor, Professor Dr. Anna Keutgen at the Bucco University in Vienna, Austria. Then I had a co-supervisor, Dr. Sabine Zikeli, at the University of Hohenheim in Germany. And furthermore, the thesis was done in cooperation with Naturland, with great support by Dr. Eva Kohlschmidt, Lea Moog, and Thomas Holz. At Naturland, the thesis was also embedded in the project with Campiña Verde, which focuses on the identification of best practices in organic greenhouses in Spain, and which also presents this, this presentation and this meeting today. In my research, I formulated the following 3 research questions. So first of all, what are the key influencing factors impacting the design of crop rotation of organic protected production systems? How are the crop rotation guidelines currently implemented, and what recommendations of actions can be derived from these practices? And last, to what extent can the experiences and practices of Italian crop rotation planning be applicable and beneficial for implementing guidelines in Spanish organic protected production systems? To find out more about the current implementation in the Mediterranean greenhouses, I visited and interviewed some organic greenhouse farms. So in total, 16 interviews were conducted. 4 of them with Italian organic producers, all of them in the region of Veneto. And here in the slide, you can see some of the main crops. And then 8 interviews took place with Spanish greenhouse producers and also agricultural technicians, since the structure of farms is that the agricultural technicians plan the crop rotations. Almost all farms I interviewed were certified under Naturland standards, and all of them comply with the current national, in the case of Italy, and international organic standards on crop rotation, and in this case, the requirements of the EU organic regulation. Furthermore, 4 external experts were interviewed. So 3 of them working for organic control bodies in managing positions, and 1 agronomist working with and also for Spanish organic greenhouse producers. And in the following slides, I want to present you the most important results I gained from those interviews. But before that, I want to show you the importance of using crop rotation also in the greenhouses. As you all know, organic agriculture follows the 4 principles of health, ecology, fairness, and care set by the IFORM. These are the foundation and also the vision for the future development of organic farming in the world. So therefore, the primary goal of organic agriculture can be put as the protection of the environment and the climate, as well as the production of safe and high quality food. And there are some basic rules and principles set by the organic regulation. So for example, the maintaining of soil fertility and biological activity of the soil, but also species appropriate and land-based animal husbandry, the use of natural regulatory mechanisms of the ecosystems, and to use seed and planting material from organic origin and propagation material from organic origin. But in the course of my thesis and this presentation, I concentrated mainly on the first point and regarding the soil fertility, which is achieved in particular through a wide-ranging crop rotation with a high proportion of legumes and other green manure plants. But first of all, what are crop rotations and what do they include? A crop rotation is the chronicle sequence of different crops, or sometimes also the same crop in the same area. So crop rotation influences the type and variety of crops grown and also the specific area where the crop is grown and how big this area will be, as well as crop cultivation measures like the planting or sowing of the new crop and the harvest of it. But next to cash crops, crop rotation also influences the cultivation of non-cash crops like the use of agroecological service crops or short ASCs. These plants are not grown for the yield or monetary profit, but to provide certain benefits to the ecosystem and the main crops grown subsequently. Furthermore, when the biomass of an ASC is terminated and incorporated into the soil, they are considered green manure. They can also be cultivated in an intercropping system, then as so-called living mulches, growing beneath or next to the main crops for a longer period of time. And additionally, the EU Organic Regulation 2018-848 defines 2 main functions of benefits of crop rotation. First of all, the prevention and protection of crops against pests and disease. And second, the increase and maintaining of soil fertility and biological activity of the soil. Those benefits are achieved by different mechanisms, which were also scientifically proven and will be elaborated in the next slides. One of the benefits of crop rotation would also be the weed control. So when growing different crops or plant species, these can suppress competing weeds through their presence. So the competition for light, water, and also nutrients. And furthermore, certain chemicals, for example, of Brassicacea or certain legume species, can have an allelopathic effect on weed species to expel them from the surroundings. And last, varying cropping management practices, for example, soil preparation or planting, can influence the upcoming of weed seeds. And even though these findings are proven pretty much for field cultivation, their adaptability to greenhouse cultivation is not yet completely proven. But as already mentioned, the EU Organic Regulation defines the use of crop rotation for pest and disease management. And in the following, I want to explain 2 examples of crop rotation mechanisms that influences pest and disease pressure. So firstly, there are chemical components present in certain plant species that have effects on soil-borne pathogens like fungi or nematodes. So a prominent example would be the glucosinolates in Brassicaceae, like the field mustard pictured here. And an important aspect in order to activate these chemicals is the damaging of cell structure. So therefore, the field mustard should be mulched before it is incorporated into the soil. And secondly, a diverse crop rotation can lead to an interruption of pest life cycles. So meaning that there's a temporal and spatial barrier between non-host plants used. As shown here in this little sketch, if you use always the same crops, the pest population can just thrive on it. But if you plant also non-host plants, the population will disappear or move to other host plants outside of the greenhouse. And this is applicable to low mobility pests with a small host range. And the last but not least benefit of crop rotation is concerning the soil fertility, the soil biology, and the nutrient availability. So due to a diverse crop rotation with different plant species, there are interaction of these different plant species, also the remains and plant exudates in the soil, which have a positive influence on soil fertility and soil biology. And furthermore, when incorporating these green manures into the soil, this increases the organic matter content in the soil and helps therefore with humus formation and increases the microbial activity. And when alternating deep-rooted and shallow-rooted crops, it improves the soil structure, which has effect on water holding capacity and nutrient availability in the soil. And at last, plant symbiosis with legumes can lead to nitrogen fixation, but also when incorporating these legumes into the soil, nutrients and in particular nitrogen will become available for the following crop. And here I pictured some of the cover crop species and plant families and the benefits when they are used as cover crops. For example, what I was able to observe that in the Italian greenhouses, often sorghum, so a poaceae, is used in mixtures as a cover crop in the greenhouses. And sorghum is known for the rapid buildup of biomass, and when you incorporate it into the soil, it helps therefore with the organic soil matter. Then quite famous legumes, for example, vetch or broad beans for the nitrogen supply. So as I already mentioned, the conversion of atmospheric nitrogen possible through symbiosis with bacteria, but also the rapid release of nitrogen from the plant residues when they are incorporated into the soil. And the last plant family of Brassicaceae, as shown here, the field mustard, but also rocket can be used and is used in greenhouses in Italy. They can disinfect the soil and therefore help with various soil-borne disease and pests. Now, in this slide, I want to show you briefly the different regulations which state rules regarding crop rotation in the greenhouses. So firstly, the new EU organic regulation 2018-848, which came into force on the 1st January 2022. It states stricter crop rotation guidelines, which are now also binding for protected production systems and not only for arable and field crops. So this means for greenhouses that the use of short-term green manure crops and legumes is necessary and mandatory, and also there should be a use of plant diversity. Secondly, there are also different regional regulations, which is the case, for example, in Italy. So there's a decree stating strict crop rotation rules for organic cultivation in Italy in the greenhouse. It says that crops may only be grown on the same area after at least 2 other main crops. So, however, one of these crops must be a legume or green manure crop. And another option is also to maintain a fallow period of at least 6 months, but this fallow period cannot substitute the mandatory use of legumes or green manure crops. And thirdly, the regulation of farmers' associations like Naturland also states stricter rules regarding crop rotation. And in the case of Naturland, this means that the use of appropriate proportions of legumes grown either in mixtures or pure crops is mandatory. And particularly for these intermediate crops or undersown crops, a huge variety of crops must be used. And there are also cultivation breaks need to be realized between the same crop. And now, after the fundamentals of crop rotation, I want to present to you my main findings of the expert interviews I conducted with the organic greenhouse farms and the external control body experts. So first of all, I want to present you the expertise of producers concerning crop rotation. For this, I asked the producers and agricultural technicians about their observed or perceived benefits of crop rotation in the greenhouses. So most mentioned were the benefits on soil in general and soil fertility in particular. So followed by the benefits on the vitality of the recent and the following crops, the pest and disease control, as well as benefits at farm level and on the harvest products. Nevertheless, 7 out of 12 producers mentioned disadvantages of longer crop rotations in this context. For example, the balance of the length of the crop rotation and linked to the loss of nutrients when the crop rotation is too long or too big. Whether crops fit in the crop rotations are suitable for greenhouse cultivation and the organic market, and also economic factors like the amortization period of the greenhouse and the absence of income during the time when cultivating non-cash crops. And concluding that, 7 producers would like to implement a longer crop rotation, but feel limited by various factors, which will be presented subsequently. And 5 producers answered they do not want to make changes in their crop rotation at all. And furthermore, I also asked the external experts for their experiences with crop rotations and what an optimal crop rotation for them looks like. So when looking at the observed benefits, their answers look quite similar to the ones of the producers. Starting, for example, with pest and disease control and soil fertility and the improvement of soil structure, but also fertilization benefits, the effects on biodiversity and soil microorganisms, the cultivation management and weed control. And when asking them about their optimal crop rotation for organic greenhouses with vegetable production, they all stated that the main goal of the crop rotation should be the improvement of the soil structure and the soil fertility. They also kind of agreed what an optimal crop rotation would look like. So for example, a 3-year crop rotation and starts in the first year with mustard as a green manure for soil disinfection, and then the application of cattle manure. Afterwards, first cucumber and then tomatoes could be cultivated, and then if needed, this summer can be used for soil solarization. And another expert explained the optimal crop rotation would consist of 3 different plant families in 2 years. And furthermore, each year there should be at least 1 legume used as green manure, and at least 1 time a year also field mustard for soil improvement and disinfection. And now about the challenges that limit the organic greenhouse farms with vegetable production in realizing more diverse crop rotation. So I clustered them under the 3 main aspects of cultivation management, economic factors, and the organic product market. In the cultivation management, for example, they mention pest and plant diseases, soil exploitation, waste and water management. And economic factors would, for example, include the rising prices of inputs such as fertilizers and pesticides, but also overall profitability of the farms, and again, the amortization of the greenhouse costs. And regarding the market, the producers see the market prices, the consumer expectation, and also the market competition as challenges. And furthermore, I asked the producers about their strategies to control and prevent pests and disease in the greenhouse, to evaluate whether crop rotation is an important tool for them. But as you can see, for prevention of pests and diseases, mainly beneficial insects are used, and for control, the producers use organic pesticides and also beneficial insects. But three producers answered that for them, crop rotation is a measure to prevent problems with pests and diseases. And this following list also shows the challenges according to the external experts, so the control body managers. None of the interviewed experts saw crop rotation as a challenge for the organic greenhouse producers. But in the following, I want to mention and to highlight some points. First, regarding the water management, the 2 points of the electrical conductivity of the water and the irrigation management were mentioned and are regularly observed by the external experts as a challenge. Secondly, regarding social factors and the farm management, so they observed that there is a lack of skilled employees as well as a big need for community building, since specific information is needed for good management of greenhouse cultivation. So knowledge transfer and exchange in communities would help the greenhouse producers. And thirdly, regarding the input of organic materials, so there is a lack of availability of good quality organic manure and as well as uncertainties about plant residue management. And furthermore, I want to present to you the impact of the EU organic regulation on the crop rotation, according to the interviewed producers. So I was identifying and categorizing factors that prevent organic greenhouse producers from implementing a longer crop rotation. And nearly all producers mentioned commercial factors like the market demand, the sale of the products produced, and the market price for the produced products. But also cultivation management aspect, and also, as already mentioned, the costs of longer crop rotation, and then also external factors like climatic limitations and water demand. And according to the experts, in the incorporation of non-commercially used crops like legumes is a novel aspect for the farm, and that makes adaptation to comply with the new regulations necessary. And also the commercialization of these crops, such as legumes, is the biggest difficulty for organic farmers, according to the experts. And concluding that, it can be seen that these factors have a huge impact, since only 2 out of 12 producers already made or will make further changes in the crop rotation. And one of the farmers stated that these changes were necessary due to the new requirements. But in general, all producers were quite open and positive about the new requirements of the EU organic regulation. And in the following slides, I want to present to you some examples of crop rotation and average crop rotation of the interviewed and visited farms. So in the Spanish organic greenhouse farms, a typical crop rotation is really focusing on Solanaceae and Cucurbitaceae crops. So for example, average crop rotation would like this, to start with a Solanaceae crop as pictured here, for example, tomato, followed by Cucurbitaceae crop like watermelon, then another Solanaceae crop as shown here, chili, but could also be bell pepper, and then a cucurbitacea crop like melon again. And then in the second or sometimes also third year, there finally would be a legume or other crop, a cover crop like field mustard. And in Italian greenhouse farms, it looks quite different, also due to the decree. So for example, the Italian producers would also start with the tomato, but follow with leafy greens like salad or celery shown here. And because in the unheated greenhouse in Italy, it would be too cold otherwise to cultivate peppers or tomatoes over the winter. And therefore, the salads are planted in batches to ensure continuous supply during the winter until spring. And then in spring, after the salad finishes, there would be for at least 90 days, so up until the flowering stage, a green manure in mixtures in the greenhouse. And after that, as a summer crop would then be, for example, zucchini, but could also be tomato again, since there were two other crops planted in between, and then the decree would allow another tomato planted. And then I want to show you some further general findings regarding crop rotation when I visited the farms. So there's usually in Spain a shorter cultivation period for the secondary crops like cucurbitacea. So tomato or paprika would be around 7 months, and then in a short cycle would be watermelon or melon for 3 to 4 months. So in order to have 2 crops per year. Then also cover crops are cultivated for 2 to 3 months before starting with the next main crop. And in Spain, sometimes only every second or third year. And one farm I visited is practicing intercropping with veg, which you can also see in the picture. So beneath the tomato is growing the veg, and you can see on top still the stalks of the tomato, which is already finished. And then seldomly green beans are cultivated as a main crop in the greenhouse. But I visited one farm in Spain that also still cultivated green bean as main crop in the greenhouse. And to sum up, all farms were very considerate regarding the harvest residues and using them in the best way possible for fertilization of the following crop. And now in the discussion of my thesis, I was elaborating my main findings. So therefore I had a closer look at the crop rotation implementation for main crops, which you can see on the left side, and the incorporation of these agroecological service crops on the right sides. And for this, I compared and evaluated the crop rotation plans of the visited farm. For example, I could find out for the main crops that the cultivation breaks are kept as short as possible because of economic reasons. The farms had a strong specialization on Solanaceae crops and overall lacked crop diversification of cash crops, but also grew the minimum compulsory cover crops and green manures. And this leads me to the conclusion that there is a possibility to explore more diverse crop rotation in the organic greenhouse cultivation in the future. And regarding the agroecological service crops, as already mentioned, the Italian farms mainly use mixtures, for example, field mustard, radish, sorghum, vetch, or also rocket in these mixtures. And on the contrary, Spanish farms use pure stands or pure seeds, so mainly veg, but also broad beans and field mustards for biofumigation. And the farmers and the external experts, they both recognize the different purposes of the effects of agroecological service plans. And my major conclusions of this discussion would be that the choice of cover crop and green manure crops should be adapted to local and climatic conditions, and the use of those plants should be further promoted in the greenhouse farms. And last but not least, I identified the main drivers and influencing factors when it comes to designing and planning the crop rotation. So the first key influencing factor that was determined were the market conditions. So the market influences the different aspects that determine crop rotation planning and influences the implementation of certain measures. And this was shown at the example that economic factors are perceived as the greatest challenges in crop rotation planning. And furthermore, the crop rotation is mostly planned by the agricultural technicians, and their decision-making criteria is mostly driven by market factors. And this shows a lack of co-determination in governments over the choices of the main crops and agroecological service crops. And this leads us already to the second factor identified, the recognition of the interrelations of crop rotation and crop rotation in general. So the motivation to carry out more diverse crop rotation is challenged by the before mentioned influencing factor and challenges of greenhouse farmers. But as already shown, there's a great potential for the overall production systems when implementing crop rotation, also in the greenhouses, for example, the improved soil fertility or the pest prevention. But by now, sometimes there's no connection seen between a one-sided crop rotation and cultivation challenges like pest and disease pressures and problem. And despite compliance with the current crop rotation requirements, many producers face uncertainties and unclearness regarding the specific crop rotation regulations and what they really mean for them in practice. And with that conclusion, I'm already at the end of my presentation. And I thank you very much for your attention. And I'm very much looking forward to also the input of Jose Manuel Torres. And before that, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now or put them in the chat.